Hope deferred makes the heart sick. That's in the Proverbs. Anyway, I think the interesting thing about going live every single day is that I do get the wide variety of emotion. Today was actually a super frustrating day, more because of trying to do something I normally don't try. I'm not a handyman by any stretch of the imagination, and and so in the studio, so one of the reasons I'm only using one camera angle, which is you over there, is because the I'm redoing the studio. That's the reason I cleared out my books from the background, and ultimately what I'm trying to do here in the studio, if you can just imagine this little setup situation, is I have a couple of stands that one stand kind of comes up here and has those blue lights, that's kind of purple back there, um, shining in the back. But I'm trying to get the stands removed and simply have the crossbar um, suspended from the ceiling. In order to do that, though, I need to hang up some curtain um, brackets, and then so to hang up the curtain brackets, you gotta drill holes, and then screw the bracket into the drywall. But and then if you want to get into more of the drywall suspending curtain rods from the ceiling, then you kind of get into the stud finder. So you go into Home Depot, buying a stud finder, marking them, figuring out where the studs are, or potential studs are, because sometimes they'll just locate other metals or other pipes or other wiring. And so you've trying to figure out where to put the screw or the anchor, or um, yeah, screw the anchor, so that it could take on the weight of the rod. Anyway, your boy's over here making holes in the ceiling, yet it's not complete yet. Anyway, so I started out by saying hope deferred makes the heart sick. So anyway, I think more frustrated today than anything. So not handy, and in fact, my wife, if I'm being frank, if I'm keeping it a buck with you guys, it's my wife is way more handy than I am. So anyway, so frustrated about that. Um, I imagine by Friday it'll be done. I try to call one of my buddies who's again way more handy than I am, to kind of help with that. But anyway, so the studio is kind of in shambles. There's pieces and parts and a drill over here to my right, and then yeah. So anyway, it's a little bit of a mess. All that to say, it reminds me of persisting even when you have bad days. So what I was hoping to do, and just to go through a few stories. I love persistent stories. It's great to look at a complete story of somebody else who might be a hero or somebody important in the faith, and see what their story ended up being, what they're known for. But then you pause during one of the difficulties along the way, and you consider if they quit. So Abraham in the Bible. So we went through the book of Genesis, and maybe we started with Abraham. Abraham, we really get introduced to him in chapters um, 11 and chapter 12 is really the first story with Abraham in it, and so then Abraham, one of the challenges they went through, I believe it's in chapter 14 Genesis, you'll find that they kidnapped his nephew Lot, and you just think about that challenge of one of your family members getting kidnapped. It's a story that it's probably not told a whole lot or not referenced a whole lot, but his nephew was kidnapped. Abraham, of course, goes on to continue the lineage that leads to Jesus and leads to many of us who are believers, who are Christians, to be saved. Yet, I just to go back to that story of his nephew being kidnapped. If when life was hard during that time period of his life, had he quit, then we don't get the rest of the story. We don't get him having Isaac as his firstborn, and we don't know him as the father of faith. We may not be talking about him like this, right? So that's one story. Let's go to the next one over. So we have Isaac, who is Abraham's son. You get his story. He was born in chapter 22, I believe, in Genesis. I'm just doing this from memory, so you'll have to check that. Isaac has some challenges in chapter 26. He actually repeats the sins of his father. If you look back on Genesis 26 compared to Genesis 20 and then Genesis 12, Genesis 20 and 12 and 20 are when Abraham had committed this sin about lying who he was married to, put his wife put Sarah in this dangerous situation. But ultimately, we see Isaac repeat that same sin in chapter 26 with his wife. So again, you think about that mistake or that problem that he faced. Had Isaac quit that problem, then what would come up the rest of his story? And then you get the story of his sons, which ultimately are Jacob, who in Esau, but Jacob, of course, becomes Israel, who's the whole people are named after. And Jacob had his own problems. His brother was trying to kill him. Had he quit at that point and not met, Rachel and Leah, who he went to have the 12 sons or the 12 tribes of Israel, then we wouldn't have his story. Or the next story over in Genesis, you could pick up is Genesis 37, the story of Joseph and his story, where there's a number of hardships. You could pick one of them, but he didn't quit when his brothers hated him. He didn't quit when his brothers abused him. He didn't quit when he was falsely accused of sexual assault. He didn't quit when he was put in prison. He didn't quit when he was forgotten about for 2 years. Those things were very, very difficult for him, but we wouldn't have the story of him. We even see the cartoon version of the movie that Joseph, King of Dreams. We wouldn't have that if he had quit. We see the full story, him preserving the line of Jesus by preserving the children, the lives of Israel's family line by setting up Egypt for success. So you can move all the way through the story. You can read Moses and having conflict with Pharaoh. You can read David's story with facing the challenge of what if he had quit before Goliath. It was difficult, right? The other Israelites were afraid. They were shaking in their boots. But if he had quit, then we don't get him conquering Goliath. We don't get him, again, also being part of the lineage of Jesus. So all of this to say, it gives me a message today is even when it's frustrating, irritating, your circumstances are not favorable, and you want to quit, I want to encourage you, like don't give up yet. Don't give up. Show up another day. Show up for another round. There's Napoleon Hill talks about, it seems as though in life, there's like a person who stands in the way of your success, and they will not get out of the way, and you gotta wear them out. You gotta show up over and over again. It's a persistence test that every person who becomes successful has to pass first. And he says many times when he studied successful people, the people who had this greatest success, it came one step after their greatest failure. So whenever you have a shortcoming, a step back, whenever you have a problem or a situation, sometimes it's that step right after that problem that makes all the difference in the world. But you think about the biggest problem that you're facing now, or the biggest problem you have faced, and then what was on the other side. Many people can attest to this, even in the area of romance. When they met the right person for them just after the worst breakup. And so anyway, I'm saying all of this because I think life, we will go through difficult times. Jesus used one thing I taught before is Jesus used the word, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. Paul used the word hardship. And you just go through each of the authors, you might find a different word that they use to describe difficulty, problem, hardship, to overcome. David had a word, Solomon had a word, Abram had a word, Moses had a word for problems that they face, yet still overcoming anyway. All of that to say, don't know what problem you have, but whatever it is, you hang on. You might just have a sweet story to tell tomorrow. And then tomorrow, if you have another problem, then you might have a sweet story to tell the next morrow as well. So anyway, hope that encourages you, hope that builds you up. Got a little biblical insight, shared a little bit about my day. Eventually we'll be back with the multiple camera angles, and I'll have this all set up by somebody who's much better, much more savvy when it comes to home improvement, and we'll go from there. But anyway, let me know what you do to encourage yourself to keep going when it's tough. So let me know in the comment, and we'll see you on tomorrow's video.